we can go ahead and get started. Here we are inside of ShareFile. I've already logged in advance of this session. So just as a quick reminder, access ShareFile just by clicking on your own subdomain and sharefile.com. So in my case, my demo is brunoalbert.sharefile.com. So with that in mind, we'll click Signatures from our ShareFile dashboard, and this will take us directly into RightSignature. What we can see from our RightSignature dashboard is a full chain of all of the documents, a full view of everything that's been going on our account. Now, as a standard user, I'm going to see only documents that I have sent and, of course, perhaps received, etc. But as an administrator of the account, I can actually filter to an admin view and see document workflows for all of the users on my account and whether they've been completed, what they are, who they were sent to, and so on. And we will come back to a little more detail on this searchable feed and tool as we progress. But again, today's focus is primarily around templates, so let's click into our template library. Now, as a user who has permission to create templates on my account, I'm going to see not only templates that are made available to me, but the option to build new ones. And of course, I can search through what's there if my organization has a particularly large number of templates. So just wanted to point that out. And let's take a brief look before we get into explaining how to build a template and the myriad of options available to you as part of that process. Let's look at one of these templates that's already established and try to understand the ways we can use the finished product. This part will be briefer, while the full explanation of how to build will be a bit more in-depth and probably allow for more questions. So let's say I want to use one of my standardized government forms and send out, for example, an IRS 8879. Right? And I've got this built as a template in advance, perhaps by me, perhaps by my account administrator. If I know who I want to send this to, I can simply click send, which will loop me directly into a workflow where I enter their name and email address, set an expiration date, and away we go. Many of you who have already used RightSignature are probably very familiar with that workflow. It's very direct, point A to point B. However, when we have a template built out, we have more powerful options available to us as well. So when we pick our form and select details, we see the pre-built template. Part of that process means I've already provisioned and marked the document up with input fields and having these assigned to specific individuals to whom the document will be sent. So I don't have to change anything for that part in order to send this. Now, if I do have a slightly different one-off document and I send this to an individual, sure, I can move these around, add a few additional fields, or subtract as needed. That's not a problem. But again, in terms of speed and efficiency, I can simply click send, get an email in there, and away we go. So what else is available to me? Well, for one, if I'm using a particularly sensitive document that perhaps doesn't need to be shared as a template with the rest of my team, I have the option to set this template to private, meaning that only myself and potentially administrators on my account will see this. The other standard users without elevated permissions will not actually see this template as part of their library. That can be important in HR or with other sensitive forms that perhaps we don't want everyone to have access to. Looking on down the list, of course, we have our button to send for signature and a few more advanced options too. One thing we can do is embed this document, this template, in our website. So by clicking generate embed code, or rather, by clicking embed in website, we can actually tell RightSignature to generate a little bit of HTML code, which will literally pop a link or even an image of this document directly into our website for a nice, polished, branded experience that's directly integrated with your company's website. When we do that, I also want to point out Our design team has put a lot of effort into the tooltips for all of the fields in RightSignature to make things a little bit easier for you. So as we go, bear in mind when you're in your own RightSignature account, feel free to hover over the little question mark and get a brief description of each field. And hopefully that'll add some clarity when you're on the user end of building these pieces and using this tool. First and foremost, if we are going to generate an embed code for our site, we would name this code, give it a title, and then we would choose how we want it to display as a button, i.e. click here to sign, as a thumbnail image of the document that a user can click on, or even inline, which will actually create a little box your users can scroll through and fill out the form without clicking away from your site, which in my experience has been highly requested by my customers. We have a couple of other key security parameters here. Do we want to limit the number of times that this particular link can be accessed in order to fill out a document? Do we want to set an expiration date so that this document would no longer be valid after a set number of days? And perhaps most importantly of all, how or if we want to validate the identity of any signers. Let's dive into what that means just for a brief moment here. So the identity method option. Normally, when we send a document directly to an individual, we've got their email address, and by them receiving that email and clicking to sign the document, we know that that email address is valid, and whoever is signing the document has access to that inbox, which is considered a form of identity confirmation or validation. When we are generating a link that can be shared in a chat room or posted on a website or embedded in a website, we're not sending this document directly to an individual. So if for compliance, security, or validity purposes, we still need to validate an email address and have that tagged as part of the authenticity credentials for this completed signed document, we can ask them when they access the link, please put in your email address and we'll send you an email after you sign the document in the website or however you've chosen to implement this. We'll still send you one email that just says, click to verify this is you. In kind, if we want to make it perhaps a bit more mobile friendly, or we have users that just don't want to do it via email, we can actually collect their phone number and perform the same validation via SMS text, which would be much the same process. They receive a message, click to validate this is you, and as part of the authenticity credentials for the document, once it's completed, we would be tagging that we've validated their phone number rather than their email address. If you need those additional assurances, then please bear in mind that's how they work and that's why they're there. If convenience and speed and ease of use are top of mind, I've heard questions at times about a vacation lease application or summer camp enrollment, something perhaps where just ease of use is paramount. We can select none and not require an email address, not require an SMS text for validation. It is certainly very easy for your users. If that will meet your security and authenticity requirements, it's a great option. So with that in mind, once we specify what we want here, we simply click Generate Link. In this case, I've chosen, hey, RightSignature, give me a button I can place on my web page. And I click Generate Link. And all that I need is to literally copy and paste this where I want it to show on my web page. RightSignature has done all the work for me. So what else is available to us? Embedding it in a website is nice. Maybe we're not all web designers. However, pretty much everyone is in the habit of sharing links in one way or another to relevant pieces of reference materials. I'm sure you've all gotten some RightSignature support links or ShareFile support links at some point. So you can actually share documents in the same manner to be signed and completed as well. From my own personal experience, I see this most commonly around the time of year when we have open enrollment for benefits. What this allows us to do, and this could also be for any industry where we have one form, we're not going to be customizing it as we distribute it to multiple people. We want to send it out blank and collect 10, 20, 500, 1,000 different responses. Great. Why not build the template, make a link to the document, and everyone who accesses that link will be able to fill in their own instance, much like embedding in the website. But in this case, I'm able to distribute the link via email, post it in Slack or Teams or however I want to communicate with the other individuals I'm working with. And this is very easy to distribute. In much the same manner, we need to create a name for this link, and we'll explain why differentiating the links is important in just a moment, because these can be tracked for effectiveness and completion. And of course, we can limit the number of uses of this link, the expiration period, and again, the identity method. Please don't forget that portion. So just for example's sake, we've got our tooltips, we've got our options, and we click generate link, and we're given just a very simple web link. Copy it to our clipboard and paste it wherever we need. Signature line of our email for a request a quote form, perhaps, or anywhere else. Now that we've talked about links and embedded documents in websites, let's talk about management and tracking. RightSignature's templates from this view, once we've clicked into a specific template, RightSignature gives us the option to manage links and embeds by simply clicking this nifty little tile. And here we go. We're able to, at a glance, see all the different instances of links, web embeds, etc., that we've created for this specific template. We can disable any of those at will. We distributed a link. Maybe it's that HR form for open benefits enrollment and the window has closed, we need to shut it down. We can click disable and we don't have to worry about it. Or maybe we need to retrieve that link. Hey, I really need to send the same one. Okay, we simply click view and we're able to pull that back again. One other option is the details option, where we, at a glance, can load the statistics on how often this particular link has been accessed and whether we've actually collected signatures through this method or not. And we're able to click into each one of these instances and load up the stats. So we can see, number one, we see why it's bad not to label your links, but we can also see that this particular one has these parameters: no identity verification, no expiration, and no other specific security measures, but it's been viewed 3 times and signed twice. Now that we understand the scope and effectiveness of the template, what if we want to actually see those specific responses, those signed, completed instances of the documents? We can click View Responses, which will take us to our built-in search feature from our dashboard that we referenced earlier. So this uses the template label and title to search through our entire document history for anything containing that specific title. Our search function also has the ability to search via signer name, sender name, any tags which are built into RightSignature that you've applied to your document. And again, we can filter for our own view or a view of the entire account as an admin, or filter by status, documents that are pending, ones that have been completed, expired, voided, or even declined by the signer, which is one of our newer options. That being said, let's take a look at building a template now that we've seen the ways to use it, and examine some of the options available to us as part of that process. So I'll click back into my templates dashboard and click Create a Template. First and foremost, we need a base document. RightSignature accepts a wide variety of documents. Technically, I could have you sign a photo of my office if need be. So a lot of the questions that we get revolve around whether fillable PDFs or Word documents, etc., would be acceptable. And the answer is yes. What happens when I import a document into RightSignature is that all of that gets flattened and the document turns into a base image. So RightSignature is requesting any input or alterations on a separate layer that's going to be layered on top of the base document and ultimately flattened down, secured, and recomposed into a completed document with a signature certificate and a hash code for security. How do I get a document in here? Well, I can simply drag and drop from my desktop any folders that I might have. That's one way. I can click Upload a File, which will allow me to browse the contents of my PC in a very familiar open dialog. And my personal favorite, I can actually choose from a linked cloud account. Now, many of you may know that ShareFile integrates with other content repositories as well, like Box and Google Drive, among others. And so RightSignature is able to pass through those and even more as well. And of course, grab files directly out of your ShareFile account. So that's what we'll look at here. Let me click Choose from Cloud. I have my ShareFile integration turned on. And so all I need to do is click on ShareFile, and it will browse my personal folders. So I've dropped some sample forms into a folder called Forms. And we will use the form I-9, Employment Eligibility Verification, as an example. So we can see that I've got the right document according to the thumbnail. That's what I was expecting to see. And now I click Prepare Document, and I'm going to establish the roles on the document that I need. So this may seem very straightforward at a glance, but if you have documents with multiple individuals signing them, it's important to consider who is signing, which portions need to be completed by whom, and whether or not there is an order in which these individuals need to sign. So by default, if we have only got one signer on the document, they'll be labeled signer 1. Very straightforward. Same thing with signer 2 and 3. But let's take a step backwards and consider that we are actually sending out an employee verification or eligibility verification document, which not only needs to be completed by a potential employee of this fictitious company, but also countersigned by the employer's representative as well. If I choose not to specify a signer order, everyone will receive a copy of the document, a prompt to sign at the same time. There's no dependency established. However, if I click Set Signer Order, I'm able to actually rearrange and control the flow of this document. So I can specify that the employee must receive and complete their portion, and only upon completion will the employer's representative receive the prompt to countersign. Once I've got my identities established, I simply click Place Fields, which will take me to my document markup and preparation screen. A couple of things I want to call out from the very get-go. Number one, I still want to refer back to our tooltips. There's a lot on this screen. A lot of options are available to you. And so these tooltips will become more necessary to really extract the full value from RightSignature in this type of scenario. That being said, at the very bottom of the screen, I can actually see a recap of the roles that I've established for this document. And Please note that they are actually color-coded. So my employee and associated fields assigned to my employee will be labeled in green, and my employer's signature or fields of input, employer representative, will be labeled in blue. So what does that look like? Let's grab some fields of info and start marking this up. As we go, please note that we have the show more option to expand some of these that are collapsed to clean up the interface a bit. First and foremost, of course, we have the request signature field. If you actually need a signature on a dotted line or what have you, this is what you would select and place. More often than not, we also need a few other bits of information, very commonly names, dates, perhaps some check boxes. So we have a few options around those as well. We can even group checkboxes together if we need a response to one of them, but not each individual one. We can collect initials, have our signers choose an item out of a drop-down, append an attachment with this submitted document. Let's see, we're looking at employee verification of immigration status, etc. So perhaps we need an ID, a scan of an ID. This would be a great way to collect that. And for our really advanced users, we even have the ability to integrate with a third-party credit card processor and collect payments. Referring back to the example of a vacation rental, this would be a great way to collect a deposit. So keeping things simple in the interest of our demonstration today and keeping the pace moving, let's look at our text field and fill in a couple of items for our employee and then for our employer's representative, just as an example. So, last name. Now, I did this so naturally, I almost didn't think about it, but I want to point out to you all that I have a feature turned on called field detection. What this allows you to do, and we can look at this with the other name fields and date fields, is simply hover your mouse cursor in a box. This works great on especially government forms, anything with lines, boxes, clear boundaries where the input needs to go. We simply hover and click, and as long as field detection is turned on, it will sense the bounds of our input box and size automatically. Now that we've got last name, first name, and middle initial laid out clearly, let's take a look at what options are available to us to manipulate those. So when I come back and click a second time on one of these input fields, I can see a couple of basic, most commonly used parameters. In this case, who is this assigned to, the employee or the employer? Note that when I change my selection, the color of the input field changes, referring back to that color-coded nature of the input across this document. And I am able to specify, will this field be required? Meaning, can the signer submit the document back to me without completing this document, or excuse me, without completing this field because it's optional, like perhaps optional comments or suggestions? Or is this absolutely required? If I check that box, this signer cannot send the document back to me and have it marked complete without filling in this particular field, and any others that I specify are required. The next option in line here is whether or not this field should be considered a merge field. We're going to discuss merge fields in greater depth a bit later in our call. However, I'll give you a brief description now, and that's that merge fields are actually specifying this is a part of the template that's going to be completed by the sender as part of the signing process. So if I want to fill in the terms of a contract or a pricing quote, or just help my client out and fill in some of this information in advance, I would specify that this template's going to use merge fields, and anyone sending out the document will be required to actually know these bits of information and implant them onto the document prior to anyone else receiving it. So if I'm on the receiving end, these have been filled out with merge fields. Everything marked up in purple is already going to have the text written in there. If that's a feature you want to use, it's very important to name the merge fields so that to help your sender complete the document as they go. Labels help with clarity, and your users won't be confused as they're sending things out to your clients. Going down the list, we have a couple of other options. Whether or not this box of text should be multi-line, generally not applicable for basic bits of information like names, dates, addresses, etc. But if I had a particularly long address, or I was asking for some type of clarity or explanation or additional commentary, I might specify, because I'm expecting a long answer, that this be allowed to be a multi-line text field. As basic as this may seem, the clear background is a very important option as well. Just for example, focus right here on this edge of the document while I check and uncheck the box. The clear background essentially puts whiteout underneath my text field. So if I'm using a scan of an older document, maybe there are some quality issues, or it's a particularly busy form, even though it may be fresh and clean and computer generated, maybe there's a lot going on and I need my response to be crystal clear and legible, I can deselect clear background and have anything input in this box pasted on top of a whited out background, literally for clarity's sake. If I choose the clear background, then my text will be integrated directly with the base document. I won't have that quote unquote layer of whiteout underneath. And it'll look like I typed it directly on top of the document. Next up, we have our default value field. This should be used with caution. A default value is something that I'm pre-filling for the end user that they can change, or end recipient, I should say. So if I'm sending this out to my potentially newly hired employee, and I suggest a default value for something like, let's say, their city or town. I'm headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina. Let's say I typed in a default value of Raleigh for their city. If that's correct, great. It's already filled in for them. They don't have to do anything. However, if they needed to change it, they can. But I want to caution you that this is considered input on the document, so they won't be forced to address that field if you include default information. So that can be very helpful in the right scenario, but it's important to understand the distinction. Also, bringing this back to merge fields are filled in by the sender. They are fixed. The end signer cannot change them. Default values can be changed by the signer, but they're considered to be complete at the time that there's a value in this field. And finally, do we want to name this field? Obviously, on our IRS form here, or excuse me, our Department of Homeland Security form here, we've got a clear label that this is the last name of the individual that we're looking at here. However, we also have the ability, and this is another topic we're going to revisit closer to the end of our call here, we have the ability from using a pre-built template to export the responses on a template into a spreadsheet, a CSV sheet for import into another platform. Let's say, for example, we've got 500 people filling in this Form I-9, and we want to grab all those names, addresses, other bits of information because they've all been filled in on the same template. We want a spreadsheet of all of that stuff so that we can import it into our HR system and generate new employee records automatically. You don't have to pull them manually. You don't have to go through a complex process. This is why it's important to understand the usage ahead of time, because this can really make life easy in a scenario like that, or generating sales leads from a quote form, anything like that. So if we label this Then when we refer back to it later to export the data from this template, this will be our column heading. Finally, we have the option to align the text left, center, or right of the input field. So just purely aesthetic, we can center it in the box or push it to the left or right. Looking down the list, so generally speaking, when we build a template, we are going to lay out every little bit of information that we need. We've looked at text fields. Let's look at a signature field. So we'll come down to where on this particular form we have the signature of the employee. We'll arrange it as necessary. One very common question that I get from new users of RightSignature is, do I want the signature box to be small? It seems to automatically be a bit larger than the box that I'm placing it in. And that's fine, that's actually recommended. This will give your users plenty of room to sign. It's not going to go all over the page, but bear in mind that a lot of folks have high-flying capital letters in their signatures and so on and so forth. So we recommend giving a little extra headroom for the signature to look more natural and not be incredibly shrunken down. And of course, we'll specify that as required. Set a date field. There are some scenarios where we may need to manually resize. We just grab the little circular handles on the sides of our input fields. And for dates, we can even specify the format, whether we want the American or European style of date format, and so on and so forth. Moving right along, anything that we have to be completed by our separate party, of course, it's the same. However, we just need to make sure we're specifying which party and double check our color coding. And once we switch to a given party, in this case, switching from the employee to the employer's representative, then RightSignature will remember that we're working with that individual and stick with the change until we need to switch again. Okay, now we've got some pre-built templates to actually use and show in practice. So with that in mind, we'll just walk through the last pieces of this template creation. So first and foremost, we do have the option to relabel the title of the document that we're sending out. So if this is going to help organize our templates, we can label it accordingly. This would be the searchable factor. If we go back through our document feed and we want to search for a given document and completed, pending, expired instances, etc., we can see here our roles. And there's also a very neatly tucked away CC option here. What does this mean? So when we add a CC party to a template, that means that by default, this email address is always going to be considered a viewer on sent instances of this document or receiving completed instances of the document, no matter how it's distributed. So this can be handy when we have perhaps an office administrator or some sort of oversight, auditing, compliance, anyone that would need to automatically receive and or review the document upon completion, but not necessarily participate in the completion of the document. If you don't want to have to forward this to someone once it's done, plug their email address in here. That'll make things a little bit easier. In instances where you are sending this directly to other individuals, this can be changed at will. Likewise, we can add a personalized message as boilerplate text to our template, which will show every time, still editable upon sending directly to an individual. And likewise with the expiration date as well. We can set a default, but if we need to, we can change upon sending this. Finally, we have tags. I called these out briefly several minutes ago, but we have the option to create certain tag labels and even a value or an ID if this is going to help us reference this later, or perhaps match something we have stored in a separate system of record. Once we've got all of those options specified, we click Create Template. And now this template is saved, and we have the options that we looked at the outset of our call, which include sending it for signature, embedding in the website, and so on and so forth. If we need to edit this template in the future, we can simply click Edit, rearrange things as needed, and that will be the default starting point for anyone leveraging this template in the future. And if we need to do a little cleanup, we can delete old templates as well. Now that we've walked through creating a template and what that looks like, let's take a look at actually signing the document. And since we discussed building a document with merge fields that prompt the sender to fill in some information as part of the sending process, we'll use a template that I've built in advance that includes these merge fields. I will also point out that when we send documents to a user or a potential signer, whether they're internal or external to our firm, with RightSignature, we'll be able to use that signer information for an autocomplete via a recent contact list. This also integrates with ShareFile, so if you're exchanging files with a given individual by name and email address, in RightSignature, you'll be able to reference that. So if you only remember their name and you're worried about making a typo of their email address, this will be helpful in that manner. In this case, I'm going to send this to my potential employee, John, and my employer representative and colleague, Cord. Next up, we can see here as part of the template, I'm going to be asked to fill in merge fields myself. So this looks familiar. This looks very much like what our signers see, but I'm given the flag, this document contains merge fields for you to complete prior to sending. Last name, first name, state, city, state, and zip code. As we scroll down, we can see it doesn't want any additional information from us. So we review, just like sending out any other document. We can add a message. We still have the option to set CCs, expiry dates, even turn a passcode on or off, add a tag. And some of our accounting-focused customers may be familiar with knowledge-based authentication that fulfills one of the IRS requirements for completing tax returns and other certain documents online. If you're not familiar with knowledge-based authentication, this is one of those systems that will ask a given sender questions about their past addresses, perhaps utilities that they've had established in certain locations, vehicles that they've owned, things like that that confirm their identity using information in governmental records. Okay, so now we've got this document sent out, and as part of the signing process, this is not unique to templates. However, it is an important topic to call out. We can always refer back to this document while it's in progress from our dashboard. Upon clicking into the document, we can actually remind the individuals involved via email, simply by clicking this button, that I've sent you a document, you need to complete it. And we can see, because there's a signer order specified, I only have the option to remind signer number 1. We know, because of the way this template was built, that signer number 2 is not going to receive the document until number 1 has completed it. If we need to correct anything, we can click Manage, which is right here. and edit an email address to correct any typos, add viewers here after the fact. Those options are still available to us. From a security perspective, we can void or edit the expiration date as well, and add tags at any time. Let's look at the signer view briefly. So I'm changing hats to the recipient of this document. And I've got a nice clean email with my company logo from RightSignature, from that guy Bruno. And I can simply click review and sign document. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this process, but I'm given a little red, almost like a post-it flag that walks me through what needs to be done. I can see here the merge field information already populated onto the document by the sender. Nice and neat, already exposed to me. In this case, I'm required to select one of these options for checkboxes, and of course, walked through the rest of the document as I go. I can draw or type my signature, select a date, excuse me, select a date. And now, even as the signer, I can see my role is done. I've got a green check mark, and there's someone else on the document workflow who hasn't yet completed it. Switching back to the sender of the document, if I refresh the page, now I can see that my signer number 1 has completed it, and signer number 2, I can remind. And so, Cord, give us a thumbs up when you've got that document completed.
I'm filling it out right now. Did you want to switch over to my screen for this?
Yeah.
All right.
All right, there we go.
All right, so I have the document here. As we can see, I have the red flags to tell me where to go. So I can come here, add a signature. Gives my signature again, since I've already used my signature. Date and date. And then as we can see, red flag's gone. I've completed everything. If I did want to save progress, again, as a signer, you have the ability to save your progress, but I don't need to do that. So I'll go ahead and submit. And now it should go back to Bruno.
Our document completion screen, and thank you for that, Cord. We can now see the green check mark, and the overall document has a green check mark and the label of executed. Fantastic, it's done. I don't have to worry about it anymore. From my feed, and whenever I click into this particular instance, I can see all of the input and markup, everything on there. And of course, I can download the blank PDF, a completed PDF, the signature certificate, which shows me names, dates, the full audit trail, any device-related information, and any validity information. And of course, all of that merged into one big document as well, depending on how I need to file it in my systems of record to run my business. So with that out of the way, there is one final topic that we called out earlier. We've looked at the merge fields, we've looked at building the template, how it looks to sign it, what we can do with our templates. But there's one outstanding piece, and that is RightSignature's data exporter. So if I do take a template and send it out to potentially hundreds of people, and I've got all of this great data sitting on this document, but I don't want to compromise that data by relying on human fingers to transpose that from one system to another. Read the form, plug the user into our HR system, read the form, make this a sales lead, etc. Then I can simply come into my RightSignature dashboard, click on Account and Reports. And as one of my report options, which we will be skipping over most of these today, but you can use RightSignature reporting to pinpoint your biggest users, understand the cycle time of your documents, etc. I encourage you to investigate that, but we are sticking with the topic of templates. So let's look at what we can do with the data exporter. The data exporter gives us a month-over-month breakdown of a given template. So we will see the list of names of our templates. Again, very important to name these appropriately so that we have the ability to use them effectively later. We're going to use something that we've pre-populated in advance of this call, the I-9 eligibility form. And then we're given the option to use the labels that we set for the fields of input to build our report. So there are a couple of native pieces of information, of data, that are built into RightSignature. Every document is given a GUID. This is a backend code. If you're using an API or anything like that, this might be more useful than manual imports, etc. And then we have the parties, the status of the document, signed, voided, deleted, etc. When it was sent, completed, when it expires, the overall cycle time, which means from sent to completed, how long did it take, and then our fields that we've labeled, the employer rep name, the employee name, etc. So what does it look like to build the report? Now that we've explained what these are, and I know we're approaching the top of the hour, I'll just run through these briefly. Let's say we want last name, first name, city, and state, and when the document was completed, right? We can pick anything out of that list. The order in which we choose the options is the order in which they will reflect on the ultimate report. So this will be the leftmost column, and moving left to right, we'll see these individual columns. We'll take a look at what that looks like pre-built in just a moment. And then we simply click Generate CSV and Export CSV, and it'll create a download for us. So looking to one of those that's been fleshed out on less of a time crunch, we can examine one of our 8879 templates, which will show us whatever fields we've selected for our report, again, in the order that we specified. And now we've got a nifty spreadsheet that we can import into another system. So with that in mind, I'll take a step back, open the floor up to Cord and Delia for any further wrap-up commentary, and if we do have time for any Q&A to address before we hit 2 o'clock.
Permissions for accessing administrative functions in RightSignature. If you come to your ShareFile account and go to the employees page, so in this case, I'll use Tepe here, and you go down to their user access and then find the e-signature section, and you will see all the permissions for RightSignature. So the basic one is the send documents for e-signature. The one that will allow them to see everything on the account is the view all e-signature documents permission. If they have that permission, then when you come into RightSignature and you go to filter, you will see this admin view button. If you click that, it will then show you every document that has been sent from the account. So if you don't want users to be able to see everything, then you need to remove that view all e-signature documents permission. Otherwise, all you see in RightSignature is what you yourself have sent, as long as that admin view is disabled. You cannot just copy a template, but what you can do is you can import overlay. So I'm going to come in here and use my onboarding form and go prepare. I'm just going to leave that. And when you get to your place field section, you will have this import overlay button under advanced tools on the right. You click that, and then you can find a template or another document you've sent. It should populate based on the same name. You can also search in here for something else if for whatever reason you've changed it from what the original document was named. And then you just click that. It'll bring up any similar components. So if I have just one signer role, it'll have one signer. If you have multiple ones, it'll ask you what you want to assign each of those fields to from the other document. And then all you do is click import, and it will move all those fields into your document. So if you need to duplicate a template for whatever reason, this is generally the fastest way to do it. As long as the document is the same dimensions and everything's in pretty much the same place, it should work pretty well. You can also use import overlay if you're sending a one-off document. So same thing, just go to import overlay, choose a template. So if you wanted to mess with a template and remove a couple fields, you could easily do that without having to recreate the whole template.
Sure, that's a great question. So first and foremost, the creator of the template is the owner of the document and thus of that link. In addition to that, anyone specified as a CC party is a viewer, and so they are appended to that workflow as well. So the default answer is the creator of the document will be notified no matter what. And if you've specified a CC party, they will also be notified.